Okay,
Hi.
we are recording. We are live. Phone lines are open. Please start.
Welcome everybody to tonight's meeting of the East Hampton Town Trustees, and I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag,
the United States
States of America,
and to
and to the republic
which stands
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Arlene, are you here? Oh, no Arlene. Okay.
Oh, I just got let in. Okay,
Can you do roll call, please?
sure. So John Aldrich,
Here.
Francis Bach,
Here.
Ben Dollinger,
Here.
Jim Grimes,
Yes.
Rick Drew,
Here.
Tim Garneau.
Here.
Okay, sorry, Susan McGraw-Keever,
Here,
Bill Taylor, and Mike Martinson. And I'll look for Bill Taylor because this is, let's see. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Arlene. All right. Start with public comment, and the first speakers tonight will be Melissa Winslow, Senior Environmental Analyst with the Town of East Hampton, and Billy Hayjack, Planner for Village of East Hampton, to discuss the Cove Hollow Pipe Project. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I have a short presentation if I could just share my screen.
How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having us. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Evening, Francis.
I'm just going to give an overview of the findings from an engineering report that was completed by VHB for the town on the Cove Hollow stormwater pipe, and then just get some feedback from the trustees on the conceptual design for some improvements that were proposed at the outlet of the pipe at Georgica Cove. So just to give you a little bit of background on the project, the Cove Hollow stormwater pipe was designed and constructed to alleviate flooding from farmland runoff along 114. The pipe runs approximately 7,300 feet by gravity from the railroad trestle just south of road down to the outlet at Georgica Cove, emptying into Georgica Pond. The stormwater flowing to the pond represents a source of nutrients, sediment, and bacteria, among other runoff contaminants that impact water. Georgica Pond, as you know, historically suffers from macroalgae and blue-green algae blooms that are fed by excess nitrogen and phosphorus loading. So that's kind of where this has all come about, to look at this area. Due to the known impacts, this project was included in the village's water quality improvement plan. The town hired VHB as an engineer to assess the current conditions of the pipe and complete an engineering review with remedial recommendations for some improvements. So the overall goals were to implement actions that will both reduce the flow of water entering the pipe by improving upland catchment and treatment, and then also to improve the quality of stormwater that's exiting the pipe and currently impacting Georgica Pond. So far, we have completed an internal camera inspection and cleanout and survey in 2017 and 2018, drainage assessment and subsurface assessment through 2019, and then just recently an engineering review for remediation. So just to get into a little bit of detail of what was included in the the report we recently got. So they observed some deficiencies in the pipe. The initial investigation looked at the structural integrity of the pipe, and considering its age back to the 1930s, pretty good condition. But they did find some deficiencies, including where some tree roots and utilities have breached the pipe, which I have some pictures I'll show on the next slide. They also noted some sediment deposits along the bottom of the pipe. There's some areas of the pipe that were damaged due to exposure at the surface or were poorly repaired, as well as some damaged or buried catch basins that are not functional. There's also some areas of the drainage network that they noted some ponding of stormwater along roadways, which indicates some areas where we could make improvements. So this is just a structure map that VHB put together for us. They identified all the inlets to Cove Hollow Pipe and noted, where there's some issues, some damaged areas, and something to work off of. So these are some examples of some of the deficiencies they found in the internal camera inspection. So you can see some pretty big areas of sediment buildup, and then also some utilities that were just kind of punctured right through the pipe. And then also a lot of areas where some tree roots are kind of just growing in through the seams. So they identified those as areas that, we would want to do some repairs. They also recommended some short-term and long-term improvements that we could make to, improve the functioning of the pipe, reduce the pressure on the pipe by trying to capture some of the stormwater in the upland, and then trying to improve water quality of the stormwater before it enters Georgica Cove. Some of the improvements are going to involve a lot of coordination between different municipal entities, the village, the town, the trustees, and then also like New York Station. But some of the short-term things we can do is install inlet filters. I put an example of a picture of a Fabco inlet filter that treats the stormwater in the catch basin itself. Repair some of the damages that we noted, bring existing structures to grade, and then look at the feasibility of installing some bioremediation in the upland. So I included a picture on the side here of a bioswale. It's a vegetated area that, the stormwater will flow into, and we can have some natural treatment in the upland. So we're avoiding, that stormwater from getting into the pipe in the first place. They also gave us some long-term improvements that might take a little bit longer to get involved. The first of which is what we really wanted to talk to you guys about today, which is end of pipe treatment at the end of Cove Hollow Road. So this would be to create constructed wetland treatment system with a 4-bay and micropool. I have a concept design that I'm going to show on the next slide so we can talk about it a little bit further. Some of the other long-term improvements that they suggested, we look into purchasing, leasing, or otherwise obtaining property where we could install some larger scale drainage storage and infiltration improvements. Work with New York State DOT to install some more structures to capture stormwater on New York 27. And then also really just the goal to be to maximize infiltration of the stormwater before it even enters the pipe. Less water for us to treat and, potentially impact Georgica Pond. So this is the concept design for the end of pipe treatment at the end of Cove Hollow Road. So this is really just an idea at this point. We would have to go out to further engineering, but we wanted to come and present this to you before we get to that point. But it really just involves reworking of the road end of Cove Hollow Road at the outfall, relocating the outfall itself to be a little bit farther north, and then the stormwater would be in flow into a meandering bioswale with a series of weirs. And then for very large storm events, there would be an overflow included that would, avoid any flooding of the area, and then that would flow into Georgia Cove. So this is really just a first look of what could be done here, but the goal really just to provide better treatment to improve water quality at Georgia Cove, and then take the opportunity to kind of look like and provide some educational signage where appropriate. So Billy, I don't know if you had any comments on, this design, or, any feedback you got from the Village of East Hampton.
Sure. Thanks, Melissa. Good evening, board members. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and present the project to you. Thanks for your time. And the village is wholeheartedly supportive of the general idea here. The Board of Trustees has seen this sort of end-of-pipe treatment schematic, and they support it. This might not be the final version of what eventually happens here, but the general concept has received full support by the Board of Trustees in the village. So we'd be very eager to see something happen there. As you all are probably aware, right now it's kind of a sea of asphalt that ends, with a big box at the end that dumps water out into the cove section of the Georgia Pond. And I think everybody would like to see this corrected or ameliorated in some way, shape, or form. And I think this is a really good starting point for the discussion.
Is this open for comments at this point?
Yeah, we really just wanted to get your feedback. If you guys had ideas that we should bring back to, incorporate into our RFP for when we go out to engineering.
Hey, Melissa, I want to commend you guys on the work that you've done on this. And this conceptual plan, I think, addresses some basic concerns. But you know what? As an East Hampton trustee, I have an issue with the fact that we basically have eliminated the vehicular access to Georgia Pond in this plan. Okay, and that vehicular access is used by a multitude of people, from the baymen to some of the hunters, to the Friends of Georgia for their harvesting of the algae and such. So I think if this plan, which it looks like it could be modified to allow for the public's better access to the pond, I think that would be a huge improvement, because let's face it, as late as last week, there were vehicles down here taking the harvested algae and stuff out of the pond from this point. And it is, in the event of an emergency or that, this is the only access point really patent on that side of Georgia Pond. So I think it's important that we incorporate some sort of emergency plan into this. Second to that, I do see a smattering of trees throughout here, which is going to basically break up what is really a nice view corridor right now. And I think it might be better to have some of those larger trees more or less frame this view corridor rather than interrupt it the way it's laid out right now.
Okay. Yeah, this is all really first draft. So, and that was actually one of the comments that our department had, was the vehicular access. So this can definitely be subject to change, and we, welcome any comments that you guys have, and thank you for your input.
Yeah, I'd like to sort of second Jim's opinions there. I see it the same way. I had a question though. When you were considering different options here, did you talk about any way of ultimately sending the drainage from this pipe somewhere else but Georgia Pond? Is there the possibility of somehow purchasing enough land and making some kind of a drain swamp or field or wetland?
Yeah, the little bit I know about this kind of work, John, I think you'd be hard pressed to handle the volume of water. This is a pretty significant watershed. And, I think this constructed wetland is going to go a long ways in treating that water. And the comments made earlier about trying to duplicate something like this on the water's path. But, this is ultimately all of that watershed finds its way to Georgica Pond. I think the crucial thing here is to try and treat that water along the way. And this is sort of the last stop, but if they can do some other constructed wetlands along the way, I think it's a nice way of dealing with the problem, slowing the water down, allowing it to be treated, allowing some of those nutrients to be mined out of the water and stuff before they get to the pond. But I think, as a first draft, it's cut into a lot of the problems that have existed there, and it's nice to see that it's addressed. It's nice to see that the parking has been shifted up closer to Georgica Road, where it probably belongs. And like I said earlier, the thing to me is because this occasionally is used by the public in a variety of ways, and not the least of which is in the event of emergency, that we do keep some sort of better vehicle access to the pond.
I think you have it exactly right, Jim. I mean, this is just one aspect of, all the improvements that we're going to be, moving forward with. But I think the flow is a little bit too high to try to capture all of it in the upland. But, the most we can, install bioswales or additional leaching structures, try to capture as much as possible, really will take the pressure off of, the flow that's going to Georgica Cove. And what we can't capture, we want to treat with this end of pipe treatment.
Am I correct in understanding that the bioswales and any other capture points would be prior to the drain water entering the pipe, as opposed to, siphoning it off somewhere along the way into a similar kind of a wetland setup like this?
Yeah, we really would be focusing on areas of ponding for installing some, additional leaching structures. And then looking at areas where we do have higher flows. I know some of the, adjacent roadways that kind of counter or bisect Cove Hollow Road is a lot of flows coming in. So we're going to take a look at any properties that we can utilize, maybe see if to negotiate with any utility companies to, lease or otherwise use some of their property, or, look at CPF to maybe purchase some parcels with, water quality funding to try to, incorporate some upland bioswales or rain gardens or, things like this to try to, treat it in that area, and it would never enter the pipe and would never make it to Georgica Cove.
This is Rick. Have you guys set some goals in terms of the remediation? Are you looking to reduce the discharge and nutrient influx into the pond by 50%, 75%? Are there any top level objectives that you've laid out to date?
Not yet. I think, that might be part of the next step, is looking at, actual the flow capacity that we would need to be looking to treat here. And then look at, how much that nutrient concentration can be reduced by these retrofits.
Okay, thank you.
So we don't have that. Yep.
Yeah. Is there going to be any end of the pipe filtration or, items that require maintenance?
This will definitely involve some maintenance, mostly from kind of a landscaping type perspective. But usually these types of structures have kind of like a pre-treatment structure that captures a lot of like debris and trash and things that won't, clog up the bioswale. Usually it's called, I believe, a rain guardian, which is what we install in a lot of bioswales.
How often do those, Melissa, get replaced or cleaned?
I think seasonally they get at least monitored so that, any filters or, trash can be removed.
Yeah, that's just another good reason to have vehicular access to the pond.
Yeah, the village Department of Public Works has been using the Fabco filters in storm drains along this stretch of roadway for quite a few years now, and they have an annual inspection and replacement program in place. So I'm sure it would just be added to that. program that they already have.
Thank you, Billy. And Melissa.
Is the village the only jurisdiction that along the way that would be,
No, this pipe begins up at 114, State Route 114. So it's roughly half is within the town and half is within the village. So it's a really good partnership program. Yeah.
so basically would only the town and the village be responsible for maintenance, or would there be proposals for rain gardens and other drainage filters along the way that might be on state property? Or
I don't know if the state would be, there's probably not enough room in the state highway right of way or anything like that. But we have inquired about, originally the concept was to try to divert some of the water across 114 to the drainage sump that exists next to Whitmore's there. And preliminary conversations with the state, they didn't seem very receptive to that. But that was an original concept. Yeah.
We have plans to look into it a little bit further.
Well, thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Are there any other questions or comments from the trustees?
Not at this point. I don't
Okay,
think.
great.
Thank you all for your comments. We'll take them under advisement. That's great.
Thanks so much for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great night.
You too.
Excuse me. So next, we'll move on to Tim O'Rourke and Dr. Andy J. Danilchuk, Stripers in the Lake Study.
Good evening. How are you? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to take a moment to just thank the trustees again for having myself come and present this proposal to you guys. Just to give a little brief overview and just bring you up to speed on what's been going on. And I've also brought Professor Andy Danilchuk along as well to do some further explanation and to provide key details that I'm sure the trustees would like from his scientific perspective and knowledge. Briefly, this has just been something of an observation and interaction that I've been having for over 25 years in regards to fishing in Lake Montauk. This observation has been going on with the striped bass and the locations where they've been very active throughout that whole time. It's been relatively consistent throughout that whole time frame. But there has been an increase in this activity over the last, I would say, 6 to 8 years that I've noticed. And it seems to be increasing more regularly and getting actually, which is a good thing, more predominant in the lake. So that's something that brought me to bring these questions to Andy and have him join and become part of a study. So I was fortunate enough to have Jim Grimes over the weekend. I wanted to give one of you a firsthand perspective on what goes on. I'll leave it up to Jim whether he wants to comment at a later date or that's entirely up to him. But just so you can gain realistic firsthand knowledge from one of your own members, I wanted to give one of you the opportunity to get out there and have some perspective. So I'd like to introduce Professor of Fish Conservation at University of Massachusetts Amherst, Dr. Andy Danilchuk, to provide any questions or answers to any questions and any details that I can provide. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Tim, and thanks for having me. And I really appreciate the opportunity to present some details to the trustees. And I have a couple slides. They're not as sophisticated as Melissa's. I apologize. But if I could share my screen, that would be awesome.
Please do.
Am I ready to go? Okay. I wasn't sure if I had the authority or not. Hang on. Okay. All right. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Sweet. Okay. And not my entire desktop, which is incredibly cluttered. Okay. So actually, hang on. Going the wrong direction. Oh, hang on. So now you'd think I would know how to do this after like a bunch of years of teaching. Anyway, all right, here we go. Apologize for that. So as Tim mentioned, about a year ago, he approached me and shared his anecdotes about the increasing proliferation of striped bass in Lake Montauk. And I had the opportunity around this time last year, maybe a little bit later, to come and visit, and where we further had some discussions. And I was really taken back by the amount of detail in his observations. And previously, I had spent some time in Montauk fishing. I'm an angler, so fishing for striped bass. So I understand the importance of striped bass to the community and to the region. And together we, based on his observations and anecdotes and my expertise based on what I've been doing for the last 20 plus years, we've formulated a proposal. And just to put it in, why is this not clicking again? There we go. Throughout the range, just a reminder, striped bass have played a historical and contemporary role in supporting communities. As a reminder, they're every man's fish. They're super accessible. It doesn't matter if you're fishing from shore, from a big boat. They've played an incredible role in the history of many communities up and down the Eastern Seaboard, including the east end of Long Island and Montauk. And because of their popularity over the years, striped bass stocks have had their ups and downs in terms of numbers. And currently, we are in another one of these situations where striped bass numbers across the board are declining. And this might seem in opposition to what Tim said in terms of his observations, in that there seems to be potentially a greater use of some of these coastal embayments, even though striped bass are migratory for important fish habitat. And there's some question about whether these coastal embayments like Lake Montauk act as important habitat for holdover fish, ones that actually don't migrate as the rest of the stock does. And that could have implications in terms of the contributions to those striped bass to the fishery, and also implications when we think about issues related to water quality and other habitat related things that may influence a coastal embayment like Lake Montauk. And so what we put together is proposed a 2-year study that examines the use of Lake Montauk by striped bass. And based on lots of different options for understanding movement patterns, one option that is very productive and can also provide a lot of detailed information about movement patterns, habitat use, and potential emigration is the use of something called acoustic telemetry. And what this technology uses, and in this case, it's called fixed station acoustic telemetry. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see this thing that kind of looks like an explosive device, but it's not. It's an acoustic receiver that sits in the bottom of the ocean, and it's actually represented in this case by these yellow icons. And what we do is we surgically implant transmitters, which is what's in the palm of the hand, into striped bass. And anytime that a striped bass gets within the detection range of these receivers, the receiver stores the date, time, and the unique ID of that striped bass. And so what happens in this type of scenario is that we can get detailed movement patterns within Lake Montauk. We can also determine if they do overwinter or if they do emigrate out, and from season to season, if they emigrate back into the same location. And so based on the way that I really like to do these types of studies is obviously with a great deal of stakeholder involvement. that, you know, this is your backyard and you're part of the fishery. And I'm very excited about the education and outreach opportunities that can coincide with a project like this. So Tim and I already have had a great deal of conversations of how we can use local stakeholders and school groups for, you know, setting up the array, you know, being there and sort of helping catching the fish for the surgical implantations of the transmitters, and just thinking about how that can act as a really important catalyst for building capacity tied to the sort of the holistic nature of Lake Montauk as an important ecosystem, and how that relates to an important ecosystem for striped bass. And so I'm just going to leave that there. That's my last slide. I told you I left it pretty simple, but the way that we have outlaid the acoustic telemetry array is with 20 acoustic receivers, and which are represented by the yellow icons. And then we're planning on implanting 30 striped bass with transmitters in each of the 2 years. So 60 striped bass in total. And one benefit of using acoustic telemetry and these fixed stations is that there are many other scientists that are using the same receivers up and down at Eastern Seaboard to track things like sturgeon and black sea bass and white sharks and you name it. And we often and we establish sort of networks, data sharing networks. So if a striped bass that's tagged in Lake Montauk actually emigrates out, that we'll actually be able to figure out where it is going and where its natal origin is. And so there's a huge benefit by being able to use acoustic telemetry that way. And you can also tell by the size of the transmitter, it's about the size of a AA battery. You know, that's considerably smaller than using satellite tags, which are extremely expensive and sometimes fall off. Because these things are surgically implanted, you know, they can track the same individual for many years. So it's an interesting technology. It's one that's used quite widely. And you know, several of my students and my postdoctoral fellow in my lab, who's Dr. Lucas Griffin, who's on the proposal, you know, he's actually has an incredible skill set in terms of analyzing some of this complex data. And so it's really exciting to put this proposal forward. And I'd like to open the floor to any questions.
Hey, Doc, not for nothing, that AA battery doesn't look too big for us, but where's that get shoved on the striped bass?
Here, that's a really good point. I didn't bring it. Well, actually, you know what? Let me see if I can actually use it. So even on a striped bass that's this size, what we do, can you see my pointer at all? No.
Yes.
Can you? Oh, great. Sweet.
Yeah.
What we do is we lightly anesthetize the fish. We actually put the fish on a surgery table. We lightly anesthetize it. And we have a pump that's putting water in the mouth of the fish so that we keep the gills irrigated so that the fish is nice and lively, because you don't want to put a transmitter in a fish that, you know, will, you know, succumb to the event. And what we do is we make a small incision just sort of but between the anal fin and the pelvic fin. And we slide the transmitter into the interperitoneal cavity, so in where the organs are, and we stitch it up. And in 2014, excuse me, no, it was earlier than that. I did a large study on striped bass in Plymouth, Kingston, Duxbury in Massachusetts, using the same size transmitters, and we had incredibly high success at tracking those fish for multiple years. And so recovery is actually quite high. And also there's a number of other studies that have been done on striped bass that have used the same transmitters on similar size fish. And we can actually, depending on the size of the fish that we're going to capture, the manufacturer actually makes slightly smaller batteries. But it's not unheard of to put a battery that's maybe it's more of like a AAA battery, maybe than a AA. But that'll work for striped bass for sure.
Andy, I have a couple of questions. Is this similar to a shark tagging program such as OSearch would do? They were here a couple of years ago in Montauk. And
yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I visited the boat. Actually, I took some of us on board the vessel to see their work. And I'm just wondering, because I follow them, it sounds similar to that. And also my second question was, over the 2-year period, or the telemeter machines are rather the telemeter monitors.
The receivers
in the water the entire 2 years. They are.
I'll work back.
How does that work for boats going in and out?
Yep, I'll work backwards. So the receivers are not super huge, and our thoughts are to leave them in for the full 2 years, so we can get movement patterns, especially if they're overwintering.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the scallop dredging that goes on in Lake Montauk? It could be.
I'm familiar with the scallop dredging that goes on in Lake Montauk. And this is a perfectly good question because it really represents the overall state of our water bodies that we're currently dealing with. When I moved here 33 years ago, the scallop fishery in Lake Montauk was probably one of the best on the East End. The amount of scallop dredging that happens currently in Lake Montauk is very minimal compared to what it used to be. And we've also made a discussion about how we're going to mark these and let people know that they're there. And a lot of these markers that Andy and I have discussed setting out, since I have good familiarity with the lake, I know where certain structure and certain areas are that are going to be less inclined to have a lot of boat traffic, clamming, and more importantly, scallop dredging. So I think that's a wonderful point that you brought up, but it's also a really good example of where the state of our water system currently is, especially in Lake Montauk.
Okay, so could you go back to my other question, Andy, with regard to OSearch and I'm wondering at what point when the battery dies, the battery stays within the fish, obviously, right? And it is a similar program.
So what OSearch does is they'll actually sometimes, depending on the species that they're tagging, they'll double tag. They'll use an acoustic transmitter and they'll put a satellite tag on. And the challenge, depending on how they're actually doing the acoustic transmitters, is that and I have shark projects in the Florida Keys and in other places, and for sharks we do put them on the outside of the animal with a dart tag. Yep. The challenge there is that sharks and fish are kind of crafty, and sometimes, like, if you have an itch and you feel like you have an itch and you have to scratch it, they're able to rub their body on the bottom or on structure to try to remove the tag. And so given that what we really want to do is have the tag be associated with that fish for a long period of time, so we track the same individuals for multiple years. That's why we use the surgical implantation. And I've done a lot of acoustic telemetry for different species where we've had the opportunity to recapture individuals. And the scars heal up really nicely even after the transmitter battery dies. It's made of an inert material, and usually what happens is the body just creates a bit of a cyst around it, and it doesn't have a negative impact on the fish. So
okay, thank you, Andy.
Yeah, no problem. Great question.
Hi, Dr. Andy, this is Rick. How are you?
Hey, good, Rick. How are you?
Maybe you could help me understand the scope of the study a little bit. There's been some general discussion about interest in the source or origin of striped bass in the lake. There's been some discussion about possible monitoring of migration movement of striped bass. We know there are, 5 main spawning areas for striped bass on the East Coast. We know the Connecticut rivers have a lot of holdover fish. I don't know if there's been real proof of spawning activities taking place there, but I know a lot of guys that catch a lot of fish there year round. Mm-hmm. And there was also talk about trying to evaluate if any breeding activities took place in the lake. And I was just curious, is that part of the study? I've been fishing the local waters for longer than I care to publicly mention. And, I've never really caught any fish bigger than what I would call, juveniles that might just be ready to spawn in any of the estuaries from the Acoustic River to Lake Montauk and even Great Pond in Block Island. So I was just wondering, if there's any data that supports bigger fish holding over.
But I mean, from my perspective, in terms of the study, that ideally, if depending on what we capture, it would be great to tag a wide size range of fish, to look at retention and movements in and out of Lake Montauk. I've heard similar reports about holdover fish in the mouth of the Connecticut River, and some anecdotes about holdovers in other locations. And whether there's spawning that's actually occurring in Lake Montauk or not, that identifying, especially as Tim mentioned, that the number of potentially smaller fish increasing in Lake Montauk, it might ultimately lead to the fact that if there is holdover in that water body, then there's obviously some ecological importance to that space. And we'd be able to compare that hopefully. And I think with these fish that we're going to be tagging, we can take fin clips and do the genetic analyses on these to look at their natal origin, if they are coming from another location. But I think in this particular case, if this proves to be an important settlement or nursery area for smaller striped bass, then understanding, especially because of land use patterns around Lake Montauk and things like that, it's important to identify, and the importance of these holdover areas may be increasing as we're faced with things like climate change, as we're faced with things like different habitat disturbances, as time goes on. I'm not sure. I think that probably answered a couple of your questions. And
I have a question, Andy, regarding the data.
I think Rick's muted.
Oh, okay.
Hey, back.
I have a question for you, Andy.
Sure.
With regard to the data that you do collect, will you be sharing that with us, the trustees?
Absolutely. Yeah, more than excited. I contribute. I feel that this is a collaboration, and a strong collaboration with the trustees and with basically anybody else that wants to be involved. Like, I think that this is important in terms of capacity building, and ultimately this is data coming from fish in your backyard, and of course I'm happy to do that. And I have a pretty strong background in terms of creative ways from an education and outreach standpoint, and hope that can be used to really help engage the community and give back in terms of providing the data and the implications of what it means. So.
Okay.
Hey, Andy, this is Rick again. Sorry, I was muted before.
That's all right.
Just another personal observation is I think a lot of light tackle fishing enthusiasts would share the view that we're seeing fewer fish on the exterior flats, or what I think Paul Dixon coined as the North Flats of Gardiner's Bay and Peconic Bay, and more fish in the interior estuaries like the creeks and Lake Montauk, 3 Mile. So that's just an observation to share with you, in that,
cool.
Particularly in the spring, the flats used to be really hot and really popular, and now you'll see all the flats boats inside the harbors fishing, which is interesting. I take it you're probably familiar with Gray Tag Research.
Yep.
And their tagging work. One general concern I have is this is a very kind of micro-focused project in a very, very small area. we have other water bodies in the Peconic Bay estuary that are similar, that, people catch striped bass in, not unlike Tim here in Lake Montauk. And I was wondering if there was any opportunity to this project, fitting in or cooperating with other striped bass research. So, if someone is studying the rivers to our north and you guys are working here, how do we leverage this a little bit so it's not just our backyard project, which is great, and the schools and all that is awesome to get the kids involved. But, it'd be nice to be able to see this fit into the bigger picture with, so much work going on for striped bass conservation.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to the point of the fact that there's a lot of other research scientists using the same receivers for studying different critters all up and down Eastern Seaboard. And there's networks of ways that we share data. And so even though this is, it's kind of addressing a local problem or local questions that are nested in maybe the bigger picture by being able to track, if and when the fish move out of Lake Montauk, where are they going? And how does Lake Montauk fit in that bigger network of the striped bass fishery? We can, that there are ways where we could also put external dart tags. There's a lot of ways that can be used to track fish as well. And it's more easily discernible if somebody catches a fish that was tagged in Lake Montauk and they see the dart tag. The problem is that you need a really good reporting system for that. And you also generally need to tag a crap ton of fish in order to get any returns. So, we can certainly, and yes, ideally, if we had, NSF style or NOAA style budgets, we might want to replicate this in a couple other embayments using acoustic telemetry. But I think that just based on the questions that Tim and I were initially sort of contemplating, this is kind of focusing on those questions related to the striped bass in Lake Montauk, how that's nested over, issues related to water quality and things like that have come up over the years and related to development. And then because of the nature of acoustic telemetry, we will be able to track where the striped bass that were tagged in Lake Montauk eventually go. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks for the questions. And even after this, I hope you can share my email and shoot, me questions because I think that these questions are really important for helping to even continue to shape and fine tune the project. So
maybe Tim could share your email with everyone and we can continue to, cooperate a little bit.
Absolutely. No, great. And thanks for the questions, Rick. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I have a question. How will you be catching the fish?
Rod and reel. And also rod and reel, and Tim and I also talked about seining that we could use in some of the locations where he often sees aggregations, and that might allow us to capture some smaller individuals that maybe aren't as necessarily prone to rod and reel. And so there's a trade-off in terms of being able to make sure that you're catching fish that are representative of the recreational fishery, and then using another capture method and to basically that'll allow you to sample smaller fish. So,
is there a baseline number of fish that you have studied before in the past to know from year to year about how many striped bass inhabit Montauk? The Lake Montauk, or no? This comes from Tim's observations and anecdotal observations. Tim, or maybe this is a good time for Jim to chime in, maybe what he saw the other day. I think there's a lot that can be said for the anecdotes that come from these observations. And we could also take a different approach with a study where we can do passive seining surveys, and we can quantify numbers and distributions. But what you then don't get out of that is the movement patterns.
right? And so that I think in terms of trying to understand, I mean, with the snapshots in terms of how you could sample and get a picture of, where are all the striped bass now is an important thing to have. But it doesn't necessarily address sort of the immigration, emigration, and how individuals use the lake across the season. So maybe Tim and Jim, do you want to respond to your sort of history of your observations?
Well, the only history I have is Tim taking me out yesterday. Okay. But I did grow up on Lake Montauk and in Montauk, and Lake Montauk is a freshwater lake that was let when Carl Fisher opened the harbor back in, I believe it was 1926. So, and I look at this and say, what are we looking at here? Are we looking at an evolution of this water body? Because I know when I was a kid, you didn't see young striped bass ganging through like I saw yesterday. Okay, like I've heard about. I've watched guys fish off the docks and catch keeper-sized striped bass over the years. But again, that wasn't something that you typically saw many years ago. So, what's happening here? Is we looking at the natural evolution that's going on here? Certainly, this is an attractive habitat due to the influx of fresh water in that here. And I do think that this could be valuable to this community, because if this same behavior is being duplicated at Northwest or over at Lazy Point, it makes some of our other work that much more important. For example, the dredging discussions and plans that we have in Napeague Harbor to improve the water quality, to lower the water temperatures, and the beneficial impacts that can have on that water body. I mean, for example, here, we've got Lake Montauk. The water heats up significantly in that lake to the point that it's become antagonistic to growing scallops. Well, that same situation occurs with the striped bass as well. They need oxygen, and as that water temperature rises, the oxygen levels begin to get depleted. So I look at this as a first step. And I know, Rick, you've mentioned sort of a much larger or far-reaching project, but, I kind of look at this as you have to start somewhere. And this is, I think, a fairly focused approach, but I think by having that focused approach, we could possibly get some really good data that we can correlate in other water bodies. My bigger concern is how are the researchers going to come up with the money to finance this project?
If I could just chime in now, if that's all right with everybody. And Jim's asked several very important questions. And, the one thing that really strikes me in Jim's comment, and that's a broader conversation, but just to be short and sweet, the observations and the interaction that I've been having with the fish in Lake Montauk basically was started as a foundation from being in Napeague Harbor. And I remember doing the same thing and fishing in there when there were two openings to Napeague Harbor. There are still fish in Napeague, but it's not like it used to be. And there's still fish in 3 Mile Harbor. I can't specifically say I used to fish 3 Mile Harbor in the beginning of my fishing career almost all the time. And I just don't fish up there as much anymore. I do know there's fish there. But personal observation, I feel Napeague's been affected over time due to the lack of the flow, which is a broader conversation. In regards to another question, in regards to the observation of fish and what types of fish we see across the board and how many fish, myself and several people that I take fishing consistently have seen gangs. And when I refer to a gang of striped bass, I'm talking a couple hundred fish. And those fish are within the 3-inch size frame, where the angler has caught a striped bass on a fly that is about 3 inches long, and the striped bass is smaller than the fly that it was caught on. And when this fish was brought to the boat, thinking we had hooked either a piece of weed or something to inhibit the fly's use, we saw congregations of fish coming out of certain rock areas following these fish, because striped bass tend to follow even when a fish is hooked. They tend to gang up behind the fish, and you'll have 1, 2, sometimes 4 or 5 fish interacting with that hooked fish. I've also observed, no exaggeration, and Jim is not the only one that's witnessed this, groupings of hundreds of fish in all various size classes. I've also seen fish much larger than keeper size fish. Those tend to be more of an individual basis or in smaller groups when they're observed in the lake. And that goes to Napeague Harbor as well. So I can really coincide my observation of Montauk and Napeague as very similar, and the benefit of those ecosystems towards the striped bass to be one and the same. Jim makes a very good point, and ultimately it all comes down to funding. As a resident here, as someone that has kids here, as someone that really feels strongly about the community and what I view as its single greatest asset, although we have numerous assets, but I believe the water system, the fish in the water, and everything the water represents to the east end of Long Island, specifically East Hampton town, is truly our single greatest asset. I think that the trustees and the town of East Hampton will be the single greatest benefactors of this study. There's an opportunity now to bring someone like Andy on board with the resources, the expertise, the knowledge, and years of experience putting a study like this together. That really, I think, if we discuss this amongst ourselves, we would be shortchanged to try to get someone with that much knowledge, experience, and benefit to come to us and help us with this study, that he is willing to first and foremost benefit the trustees of the town of East Hampton. You know, tonight might not be the perfect opportunity to discuss a hard number in regards to a financial contribution with different entities of the town, but I feel very strongly that if this is broken down over 2 years, any number that's contributed is a realistic contribution to the overall project. If anyone has any questions or comments to that, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Hey, Tim, it's Rick.
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to ask, did I hear you correctly in saying that you've been catching 3-inch striped bass in the lake?
That's correct. And if you would like another individual, and that's where this whole concept started. And this is an angler that I have who actually is a homeowner on Lake Montauk, who has been involved in the fisheries of Montauk long before anyone else. Even though he's not from here, he's been fishing here since he was a kid, and I believe he's 65 years old now. His family's been very active in it, and he currently owns a house on Lake Montauk. His main motivation is sight fishing for fish around the world. We've had this experience on a couple of occasions. And that's where this really started, with a scratch of the head. And you're looking and you're saying, where are these fish coming from? And this is not a random, isolated, individual fish observation. This is when you're standing there, and I'm sure, Rick, you've seen this in over the years of your fishing experience. Some days you stand there in awe and you marvel at what nature is presenting to you. And you're sitting there wondering where, why, and how this is occurring here. And that was definitely one of those circumstances. And I'm not trying to, give a long-winded exaggeration on that, but that was a reality and a fact. And that individual would be more than happy to discuss this as well. And that was part of bringing Jim into the mix. Ideally, it's to slowly and have someone who represents the trustees see this firsthand and get a more intimate knowledge of how much of this is actually going on.
Right. No, that's interesting, only because striped bass usually don't enter open water bodies until I think it's their 3rd year. So that would put them considerably larger than 3 inches. So by default, those fish would have had to have been born there. There's no other explanation. One would think,
and I do not, this is part of the reason why I really want Andy to get on board, or if I'm open to any recommendations from the trustees.
Well, I mean,
sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Oh, no. Well, this does kind of, Rick, fly in the face of some like well understood breeding habits, the striped bass. But, you know, it wouldn't be the first time that we found out that we really didn't know what we didn't know. I mean, personally, I feel a curiosity here an itch that I like to see satisfied. I think in your prospectus, you threw a number at this, Tim, of a couple $100,000, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Question I have for you right off the bat. Is this the realistic number? Is this a pumped up number that hopefully could be negotiated down to? Or is $200,000 bare bones and we're not going to get much information out of it?
I'm going to leave the breakdown.
I'd like the doctor to answer that question.
I can speak to that. So the one thing that I was able to do, I collaborate a lot with a good friend on a lot of projects. Is I was able to get a commitment of 15 acoustic receivers from his lab for this study. So that 225,000 already is offset. It would be much more expensive if we had to purchase the additional 15 acoustic receivers. So in our budget, we were only really needing to purchase 5 acoustic receivers, the transmitters, the travel, which is not great, right, from Massachusetts to Montauk, and it's pretty economical. Built into the budget is I made sure I hate having to go back to donors and fundraisers for more money. That's never a good thing to do. So I basically put together a realistic budget that includes line items for accommodations and boat use, and so the logistical support, that number could be whittled down if we were able to garner more in-kind support, that when my grad students or postdoc and I were down to help to do the tagging to set up the array. So that 225,000 is I think a realistic number that already includes the provisions of having a lot of the technology, the acoustic receivers being provided for. And I think that really kind of that, and also if we were to have to run a similar proposal through a federal agency, for instance, the potential indirect costs would be a heck of a lot higher. So if we can, and I had this conversation with Tim and others that, I've run similar projects like this on other species in different locations, that if you bring a lot of passionate, like-minded stakeholders to the table and you're able to provide those contributions, that one, you can actually reach those financial goals, and two, then you have groups with buy-in, with actual physical buy-in in terms of the importance of the study. And ultimately that creates an opportunity, a better opportunity for everybody to take ownership over the results. So there's kind of a method to my madness in terms of how we put the budget together. There is wiggle room related to things related to accommodations and things what we're on site. But there are sort of harder fixed costs, which are like the transmitters, the travel, and then support that I need for my postdoc. So
right. Well, I'd like to speak really right now to our other board members. I personally think this could be a very valuable thing for us to get involved in. Lake Montauk, as we all know, is not in our jurisdiction, but our interest in the fishing community and the fisheries very much is. And it's not like we don't already have some involvement and some engagement in Lake Montauk. We operate a pump out boat on Lake Montauk 7 days a week during the season. We're looking at a $200,000 study. The question I have for our board is, if we're gonna help fund this, to what level would we feel comfortable? Personally, I think what I would love to see is a commitment from our board of $25,000 a year for the 2 years. and we go right to the town immediately and see if they'll match that. And, you know, in one fell swoop, these guys are halfway there. And I think anytime you're going out and trying to do fundraising, the most important thing you have right off the bat is, has anybody else ponied up to this? And if so, to what degree? I think we could set an example for the rest of the community by reaching deep here. If we feel that this is important and are willing to make the commitment on that.
Yeah, that number doesn't sound crazy, but they should probably make a presentation to Melissa's committee and see if they can look at this as a water quality thing with the Community Preservation Fund and get another get a similar commitment from the town.
I mean, are there any other sources of funding that are in place at this point, or would we be the first ones in?
We currently have we do have interest from personal stakeholders who are personal individuals willing to make a contribution. They've showed interest in financially supporting this, but part of that would be to break it down after we get an initial number. Then we can figure out a realistic number to say, hey, we need this much if we get 20 or if we get 10, depending on the individuals. All along, and I said this to the board when I first came here, the support and the backing of the trustees provides essential validity to this whole thing. And I've been taking my time and trying to do things right and take the appropriate steps to ensure, as Andy says, you don't want to come up short or you don't want to kick the football and not hit the field goal. I know you're taking a huge leap of faith by backing this project, but all along I've felt strongly that this is the best avenue to start.
I like Jim's idea, and I think maybe we should discuss it as a board. I like the thought that the town would also contribute, and I believe that although we don't have jurisdiction over any properties or bodies of water in Montauk, we're good neighbors, and this is a part of our community, the fisheries and so forth. And I love the idea of the education, outreaching to the students and the schools to get their involvement. I think that's very important. I'm also wondering, since this is scheduled it would start in 2022 and 2023, how that might, and it may not be, important to the studies that are being done or will be done by Ørsted, that somehow this might connect. It may not, but I'm not, I don't know. Francis, I see you're shaking your head no? It wouldn't. It's not an extra amount of data.
Yeah, Susan, that's an independent study.
No, I know.
Focuses geographically on a completely different area.
Well, once the striped bass leave the lake.
Well, we're going to say. Well, you know what? What I think maybe where you're headed, Susan, is, listen, these guys, if they're tracking these fishes' movements within the lake, and as you can see by the telemetry set up at the end of the harbor, they're trying to get some idea what direction they're headed once they leave. Yeah, these individual tagged fish could potentially be picked up on the telemetry array that has been installed off of Georgia, and that itself could provide very valuable data to this project and Ørsted's.
It's an extra part of data that I think is important, and so I like that the two might actually have some. It might have some merit, but I like your idea, Jim. I think it's a good one, and I think it's in good faith for our fisheries to study.
Hey, Susan.
Question, which I think Rick brought up at one point, but the nursery idea that maybe the striped bass are actually, spawning there, but then heading out would be very interesting to me to find out.
Right.
Migratory.
Hey, Susan and the rest of the board, do we feel so good about this that somebody would like to put a motion forward to fund for the amounts discussed at this point? Or do we feel like we should table this until the next meeting and have a vote at that point?
I'd prefer to table it personally, and so we can discuss it among ourselves.
All right.
I think we can
I
also
favor that.
possibly consider some in-kind donations with the cash. So let's talk about it and vote next meeting.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Hey, guys, thanks for coming.
No, I appreciate you having us here and having us. And also, to me, this continues to be a collaboration. I never treat any of my projects as working in a silo. So I hope that Tim and Arlene, right? You can share my email address. We can continue to have a dialogue about this. I get excited when I see other people's passion about fish and their environment and taking care of things.
Can you tell us a little bit about Dr. Lucas Griffin, which I noted will be doing the field work? Because he's not here tonight. Is he going to at some point be available to come speak to us?
Absolutely. Yeah. So he is a postdoctoral fellow in my lab. He was previously a PhD student of mine. And prior to that, I hired him as an undergraduate when he finished his research or finished his degree out of College of Charleston. So I've known Luke for probably about 8 or 9 years. And he is incredibly professional. He is such a diplomat and such a really good person that combines the research with education and outreach. I view him as an incredibly important asset, colleague, and friend. So, and that's the way that my kind of lab works. In that, I really like to build a strong skill set, and also because of the nature of the recreational fisheries that I work on. Any good fishery is not just about the fish; it's about the people. And the graduate students and postdocs in my lab have to really understand and be really good at working with stakeholders. And just as an example, Luke's also been managing. I've got a tarpon telemetry project in the Florida Keys that started in 2016, and he was thrown to the lions with all the fishing guides in the Florida Keys and the politics down there, and he's navigated that in an incredible way. And I think very highly of Luke, and I think he would just be an incredible part of this project. So if you would like him to speak to the trustees, I'm sure I can arrange it. So.
Okay. One last thing before we go, I'm just reading on the paperwork that we have, that you would be holding a presentation each winter in Montauk to highlight the preliminary results of the study. Would we be? Would you come and visit us from time to time along the 2-year period and not just annually?
Absolutely. I love getting in the field, and I love sharing data and information and stuff. So I would definitely be a presence in Montauk.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And Tim too. Thank you so much.
Nope. I appreciate all the time the trustees has given to this matter. I can't thank you guys enough for considering everything and your support, which is fundamental to this project. And again, if anyone, the invitation I presented to Jim is open to any member of you. And it's a magical situation that's happening there, and I'm more than happy to share it just to give more validity to the overall project.
Me.
Thanks again, and enjoy your evening.
Hey, Tim, it's Rick.
Yes.
Hey, no spot burning.
You have to be. You can come fish, but you'll be blindfolded, but it won't affect your catch rate.
Yeah. Take care. Thanks, guys.
Thanks again, everybody.
Time to shuffle my. Thank you.
Thanks.
Time to shuffle my kids to bed.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Next we have David Larkin and Terry Marks at 10 Ingalls Road and 11 Ingalls Road to discuss the erosion problem at their properties. Oh, okay.
Terry, did you want to go first, or?
Yeah, they have to unmute themselves.
Oh, Terry, you need to unmute. I could text her, actually.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, she got it. Yeah. I thank you for having David and I here tonight to talk about our story, trying to preserve our properties. And in the Springs, our house is on 11 Ingalls Road. Our story, Andy's, my husband's and mine, begins with Hurricane Bob. As many of you know, Bob had a big impact on 3 Mile Harbor in 1991. We lost our brand new sailboat and a wooden bulkhead that had been protecting the shoreline. The bulkhead was there when my husband bought the property in the early 70s. And at the time, there were no structures on the property. I gave Arlene this document so that maybe you guys could see some of the pictures I included. The first picture is not great. It's from back in the 70s. See some of the pictures I included. It's from back in the 70s, but it is, if you put it at the right angle, you can see the wall. I'm not sure of the exact date, as the papers are in New York City, but in the early 90s, we applied to rebuild the bulkhead. Our plans were approved by the town of East Hampton, the DEC, and all other authorities except for the East Hampton Town Trustees. For several years, we didn't have protection for the property as we were unaware of any options we may have had. And then at one point in the 90s, we even engaged Ed Hollander, who was known for dune reconstruction, but that really didn't come to anything. So in 1914, when David, our neighbor, had gotten approval and had already built a quar log barrier, we were pleased to find that really there was finally a solution to our land. We were told that the quar would essentially melt and form a strong protective natural barrier. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. As you can see, after tens of thousands of dollars spent on replacing the logs year after year, we stopped doing so 2 years ago. Over the years, particularly after storms, whole chunks would disappear and had to be replaced. Gaps would form as the water just sat for hours and soaked the logs. No natural barrier was formed in front of our home, but our neighbors to the south have had significant shoreline buildup as our material washed down the shores. And these are just a few pictures of different times of year. The one of them showing that that was after a big winter storm and the quar had just all washed down towards the marina, down towards Shagwong. Because of the intensity of the storms, the increased wave action from speeding boats, and the fact that the properties surrounding the Larkins and ours will all have hard structures, we are now beginning to lose significant land, and erosion is causing deep holes in the property towards our home. Bushes that were planted to protect the property are now falling to the shore, and the water is eating our land. I'm really here tonight. We have no major plan. We're just here to ask for help. We want to keep our property protected and to look for a solution that will work for all of us. And now David is going to continue with the presentation.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks for your time. Trustees, really appreciate it. And a special thanks for Arlene for getting us on the docket. So we've been on 3 Mile Harbor since 2003. So there's the Marks who live just to the south of us. There's my family, and then there's Ed and Dale Grant who are just north. There's an additional 9 families that are part of the Ingalls Road Homeowners Association, and we think that they're supportive as well. So there's kind of a cluster of people that sort of have the same problem. I just want to say we haven't filed any applications. We're really here looking for some advice as to how to proceed going forward. In 2011, I think it was, we had a meeting with the trustees at that time. And as Terry mentioned, we were authorized to put in kind of a coconut husk log structure that's sort of stapled into the ground with wooden stakes. And honestly, we were hoping for a different solution at the time, but we took advantage of what the trustees offered and gave it a shot. As Terry's mentioned, every year it sort of disintegrates a little bit more, and we're putting in money every year to maintain it. And then the last hurricane was kind of 5 or 6 years of damage. in just a few hours. And it's very frustrating because as I was sort of walking the land, I got an email from Seacoast Enterprises where, I keep my boat over the winter, and they were sort of talking about how happy they were that they have a brand new bulkhead that's 18 inches higher than it used to be. And it just sort of struck me how unfair it was that almost all of the high bank shoreline to the north of us between East Hampton Point and our property, and I'll show you a quick PowerPoint shortly just to give you the lay of the land. There's just a string of hardened bulkheads that actually direct water to our shoreline. The Grants, my shoreline, the Street Association, and the Marks. It basically funnels the water against us. Then you get to Shagwong Marina, and south of the Shagwong Marina, pretty much all of the houses there are also hardened. And it just really struck me as unfair that for whatever reason, decades ago, literally, whoever was owning the land at that point simply chose not to get bulkheads. And because of that, we're unable to protect our shoreline. And in fact, the bulkheads that are there are actually accelerating our problem. I'm really not talking about climate change here. This is a bit of a different issue. We have nor'easters every year. Just the prevailing winds and waves kind of batter against our shores. I actually picked up a canoe during Henry. Nobody's come to claim it yet, but the water sort of slammed against our bank. I got an aluminum canoe, but I get a regular assortment of floats and bumpers because of the wind and the waves washing against our shore. We're also on the boat channel, and there's a speeding issue in the harbor. I really don't expect the trustees to have a boat anchored outside of our shore. I'm sure they have more important things to do, but there's lots of wakes that are projected against our shores as well. The other stuff I kind of wanted to talk about was really about how I love living on the harbor. As I mentioned, I've been there since 2003. It's still as beautiful today as it was when I moved in. And I want to give a lot of credit to the town and the trustees for helping maintain the harbor. I know the harbor, though, is not kind of a natural refuge. It's more of a managed recreational area. And the fact that there already are a lot of hardened bulkheads, I feel I just keep going to the concept that it's sort of unfair that 90% of the shoreline is hardened and ours simply isn't. And it's really frustrating for Terry and I to just keep putting in money to a failed solution. So
right.
Again, looking for some
David,
guidance.
Hey,
Yeah.
David, I think you've painted a good enough picture.
Okay.
Hey guys, I visited this property, I think it was about 2 years ago. Okay. There is a core log installation that was there that probably fell short of the way I would have done it, but I'm not going to critique somebody else's implementation. The problem they have is the aspect of this shoreline basically deprives, because you've got an overhanging tree canopy and stuff above this, basically deprives the shoreline of any significant light. So the buffer plantings that you would typically use when you're employing something like a core log installation, I'm going to say even if they were planted, they probably would not have performed in the long term. So honestly, this is one of those properties. I've looked at it. I don't really see an alternative to a hardened shore. Okay. And at this point, in terms of us helping you, David and Mrs. Mrs. Marks, we don't help you. If you want to put together an application and hire an engineer and go through the permit process, we'll respond to those. As a word of advice, I think the best thing you could do would be to not start with our board, but start with DEC and Army Corps.
Sure.
And then come to us. We would be the lead agency in the town because it's entirely or significantly in our domain. But that would be the best thing I could offer, or our board, I think, could offer you.
Well, I think we fully intend to hire professionals and pursue that course, Jim. So thanks for that suggestion. I didn't want to take the opportunity to talk to the trustees. You're kind of my neighbors, and I guess Terry and I are a little emotional about this, as people often are about these issues. So I thank you for your time. We're definitely going to pursue a course of action along the lines that Jim suggested, and I'm hopeful that when it does come back before this body, that we've been able to just paint a little bit of a picture, and hopefully you guys will be familiar with the issues when it comes before you again.
Yeah, and if any of our board members have some questions or that, I happened to visit the property. I walked it, and I don't remember. I think I even did some cost analysis of what you had in terms of a replacement cost on that core log. To me, guys, what I find disturbing sometimes is some of our other agency partners here ask somebody to put in a soft control, which in this case is over $100,000. Okay, to definitively find out that it's not going to work, and then you're faced with the expenses of what ultimately you would be allowed to do. And I think this property probably is a property where a stone revetment that could be combined with some vegetation, which could be combined with some management practices in terms of pruning of the trees above it, and could give you a very durable and a secure shoreline.
Again, thanks for your time, everybody. I'd be happy to have you guys come visit, but I think Jim's painted a great picture. And we look forward to coming before you again with our application, and hopeful for some relief.
I just like to say, I also visited the shoreline last October and last week, and I'm certainly not any expert on shoreline stabilization, but it seemed to me that one thing exacerbating the deterioration of the core log structure was the securing mechanism. And I think it would last a lot longer if there were a better securing mechanism for it. I also in my observation, your two properties are bordered on the north with, as you said, David, another property that's not bulkheaded, but has, I believe, a more gentle slope to the upland than your two properties do. And the properties south of the marks is also a much gentler slope and has a very low bulkhead, 1 foot, 18 inches off the beach or something like that. It seems to me, speaking as a non-expert, that whatever plan you try to come up with a professional might want to try to tie in to those properties as well, as best you can, so that we don't just get, another piecemeal potential solution that might not take into account what's going on next door.
Thanks, Sean. Our neighbors to the north, the Grants, are very interested in this as well, as are the people on our street, the homeowners association. So again, thanks for your time, everybody. John, I just want to comment in terms of fixing the actual core log. There was a very detailed meeting with the trustees in 2011 as to exactly what we were permitted to do. My personal feeling is that more stakes would probably not make the installation any more secure, and it's been 10 years. So, to your point, we'll make an application and hope for favorable consideration when it comes back around to the board.
I just want to say thank you for listening. I think we have been heard, and we look forward to further interacting.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing your application.
Great.
Good. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, guys, Jim has to go on ambulance squad duty. So can we just hit on two subjects he needs to talk to us about? Dredging Little Northwest Creek.
Okay. Let's see, old business, dredging a little Northwest Creek. As some of you may or may not know, we have all of our permits for that project. And as of Friday, the funding, the DASNY grant was in review, and that looks very positive. And we're expecting to do this project in December. So Drew Bennett, I've spoken to, he's putting together a bid package as we speak. So we should be having that project go out to bid very soon. Any questions, comments?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
That's exciting news. It's wonderful news.
It is wonderful news.
Yes, I appreciate
Second to
everything
that.
you've done to bring this to fruition.
Okay, second to that, letting of Georgia. Okay, as you all know, we typically let Georgia around on or about the 15th of October. Some things have come into play here that I think I would like to get an affirmative to open the pond earlier this year. We've got a couple of things going on. I circulated a letter to all of you members earlier today from Chris Gobler. The salinity numbers in the pond have rapidly gone down, and he's concerned about the impacts that will have on the oysters that have been laid out on the south end of the pond. He is also concerned about the high levels of blue-green algae. Okay, the pond is currently again closed to crabbing. And third, we have many of our waterfront homeowners and adjacent property owners there are dealing with high water table issues. Water in their basements. But I think the biggest thing we should be worried about right now is that we have these septic systems that have not been upgraded, that are inundated at this point. And clearly it all have negative impacts on the pond. So what I would like to do is have a vote tonight to do the letting early. I can look at the weather, long range weather, pick a nice high tide with a northwest wind during daylight hours that we can take advantage and do an earlier let on this. I spoke to Richard Lester earlier today about the Baymen will be needing to relocate or pull their crab pots. He was fine with that, and that's that. So if we could have, I'd like to make a motion that we do an earlier let this year on Georgia Pond for the purpose of water quality.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
All right. Hey, thanks. Last, probably but not least, I see that we had the tree, the dead tree overhanging Two Boatyard. We also have a tree that's down in Georgia on one of the drains leading in. It's actually originates from the old Colicchio property, which is now owned by Dr. Rosen. I got a call actually a month or more ago from Joel Portugal about the problem because it is inhibiting the flow of the water there. So what I did, I was able to get a hold of Dr. Rosen today. He gave me written permission for us to cross his property to remove this tree. And maybe, John, I know you had stopped over to the Boatyard Lane property. Maybe we could get a price from a tree guy on both of these things so we could take care of it.
Okay with me.
Okay, that's all I got, guys, and I appreciate you changing the schedule around here a bit.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
All right.
Thank you.
All right,
Hey, guys.
public comment. We have Dr. Joseph Scalia regarding his property located at 94 Runnymede Drive. He's applied to the trustees for permission to build a retractable aluminum ladder up to the beach from his bulkhead. Currently has DEC and ZBA approval to build a 45, I'm not sure what that means, a stairway down his bluff to the bulkhead and will revegetate his bluff. Dr. Scalia, are you with us?
I don't think he's here, Francis. I was going to deal with that.
Okay.
This is a house that is built, basically. It's got ZBA and DEC approval for a staircase down the bluff. It ends in a bulkhead. That's not a new bulkhead, an older bulkhead. And I believe the only jurisdiction we have is where the staircase would meet the beach off the top of the bulkhead. Dr. Scalia's proposed, and this has been accepted as part of his DEC permit and ZBA permit, a retractable aluminum staircase that is fixed to the top of the bulkhead and can slide up and down onto the beach. So it's pulled up in high tide or in the winter and is off the beach and contacts the beach when people want to use it. If you want to see the plan, I can share the screen. If you feel that you have enough information to move ahead on this, let me know.
I'd like to see it, the plan.
Okay, I'll share my screen. This is the survey. The staircase location is over in this, on this side of the property, the north, or I guess it's the eastern side of the property, where the beach is widest. The beach basically goes right to the bulkhead about halfway to the west. But there's a triangle of beach on the eastern side of the property. That's where the stair would contact the beach. So there's a picture of the stair.
Proposed stairway.
Here.
And that actually slides up and down, John?
Yeah, this is the stair. This is approved by DC and ZBA. It's a, it's a store-bought deal, slides up and down. It only extends from the bulkhead out onto the beach about 30 inches.
Wow. It's made of aluminum, is it?
It's aluminum, yes. So I'll make a motion that we approve this application for the stair.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. Move on to new business. We have an invitation to the trustees to visit Mabel and Victor D'Amico's studio and archive in Lazy Point. Did one of you want to talk about that? Susan, was it you?
Actually,
I think it's Tim.
yeah. Hey, Francis. I had a meeting with the director, Chris Cohan. I guess about a month ago. He's super nice guy, and it's an incredible place. The trustees did help designate it as an historic site. And the reason for the visit is just he wants to personally introduce the trustees to the studio and the archive. Mabel and Victor were art educators, and this tour is an educational in regards to the history and culture of East Hampton and Amagansett, and specifically Lazy Point. And he'd like to give us a tour to educate us more about this amazing property and experience the scope of the collection and its history. The house definitely reflects that. And I would just like to propose a time sometime later in October. I'll probably send out an email to everyone to see what might be a good time for just like a 1 hour visit and a little overview from him. And we're hoping that we can have spouses welcome and include Arlene and Allison as well. It's a super interesting place to visit, and I encourage that we should all try to attend if possible.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I was there last year when they did some work And I had a personal tour, and I have to say, it's a wonderful place if you have not seen it, and I'm speaking to the public now. It's got a terrific history to it, and it's fascinating. And my son, when he was little, had art classes there. So it's a really unique, historic building itself. It is a vessel that was actually put there. So good. I'm glad that you reached out and are introducing it to us again.
Tim, is this the barge or is it the studio?
No, it's actually the studio, Susan, and everyone. So it's their art studio and their archive. So it's actually not the art barge. And
it's on Shore Road. It's on Shore Road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I mean, it's right on the water. It's completely worthwhile, and I hope we can all get together and do that.
Good. Thank you, Tim.
Sure.
Okay. Next we have East Hampton Village Centennial Celebration and Parade. So we've been invited to participate in the parade that will be held September 25th at 11 a.m. We've accepted that invitation, so whoever would like to join, that would be great. The plan at the moment is we're hoping to take delivery on the new pump out boat shortly before that, fingers crossed, and we will just put that on the truck and tow it through the parade.
Sounds fun.
We could have trustees aboard.
September 25th?
If that doesn't arrive, we're considering pulling the one out of Montauk the night before and then bringing that down. So,
who's sponsoring this, Francis? Because I saw they took a large one-page ad out, but there was no, I thought maybe it was East Hampton Chamber of Commerce, but it didn't say anything. And I see that there were banners flying on the street poles on Main Street, but it doesn't say who's sponsoring it. It doesn't say Town of East Hampton or anything.
I think it's the Village of East Hampton.
Okay, because it doesn't say anything. So
yeah.
What time again, Francis?
It kicks off at 11 o'clock. We would have to be there before that. That information, I believe, is coming later this week.
Okay.
Francis, I just have a question about events, this event and events like it, in light of the fact that we're not meeting in person here, but we're meeting on Zoom. What's been the discussion about these large events going ahead?
Honestly, there has not been that I'm aware of.
I'm also thinking of the clam contest in the same way.
So was I.
You know, we're kind of day by day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're watching it very closely.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, what happened last year was we had to change the way it was done, but we still had the contest.
Right.
So, you know, instead of looking for a hurricane, we have to look at the percentage of people testing positive. So,
I mean, as far as our participation in the parade, I think it's a large enough vehicle. We have the back of the truck, we have the boat, that we could, you know,
could wear masks.
Yeah, our mask and distance enough to be fine, and it's outdoors. And I think most of us, if not all, are vaccinated. So,
yeah, no, I get it. I just I was at the Sag Harbor Fest yesterday, and I mean, if there was ever a spreader event, that was it. And the irony of meeting on Zoom tonight just smacked me up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll be sure to stay away from you then.
All right. Next we have, I think
we did opening.
This is Susan. New York State Assembly public hearing regarding.
Yes, I sent everyone out information. I was on watching the Assembly, waiting for something to come down or be voted on. And I saw the next thing that's coming up on the assembly for a vote is sponsored by Assemblyman Steve Engelbright. He's the chair of the Committee on Environmental Conservation. So I sent it first to Francis, and Francis, I went researching and reading, and I just selected some of the articles, and I sent all of this to all of you, I guess now a week ago, and then I also followed up today just in case you hadn't read the articles, to let you know that this is a proposal to, it relates to, and I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, neon nicotoid pesticides. It harms our bees and pollinators, but it's a poison to chemical that is found. Various different chemicals are found in products for fertilization. And in particular, this concerns our bee population. Roundup, which is a product that most of us know the name of, Monsanto Bayer owns it, has this particular acetamidoprid, which is a neon nicotoid or whatever the name is. But I think it would behoove us to send a letter. They are going to have a hearing on September 20th. And since the trustees are all about waterways, and we are always concerned with pollution, contamination, chemical runoff, our whole meeting earlier about waterways, I wanted to ask if we could vote on the East Hampton Town trustees sending a letter to say that we do support a ban on this type of pesticide, which we are environmental. And I personally, I sent it to APC, I sent it to the town as well. And I'd like to know if you all would support this. And we could just write a letter from the East Hampton Town trustees to say that we support this bill.
I'll make a motion that Susan drafts the letter and Francis signs it and we send it.
I already volunteered that.
Okay.
I'll second that.
I will
support that.
I'll draft a letter and Francis can review it, and then I have to get it in 2 days before the actual hearing. That's the rules and regulations.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you. I'm sure the bees will be very happy.
All right. Next is the dead tree that we spoke of earlier. We did the dredging, but largest clam contest.
So
Susan.
Francis, about the dead tree,
I was going to say, John, I have somebody, if you want someone, I've had some trees that I've had to cut, and he's terrific, the company. So if you'd like, I will give you that name.
I'll give you a call. But I mean, when I looked at this tree, I kind of, you said we'd have to sort of assess the situation. Do we have to authorize a purchase here or just go ahead and?
Yeah, well, let's get a price. I looked at the tree too. I used to do this kind of work when I first got out of the service, and it's very unlikely that tree is going to hit that house within a couple of weeks.
No, it just died.
It just died.
It is right on the property line. It's probably going to require a climber.
You're going to have to take it down right. You want to put a line on the top of at least one of the trunks. One of the trunks would just fall right down naturally, I believe. But I think we're dealing with issues of liability insurance. Let's contact a couple of tree companies, get a price, and do it.
I'm going to send you my contact now.
I'm not familiar with where this tree in Georgia is, so if somebody can direct me there, I'll.
That sounds like it's place. It sounds like it's already down from what Jim was explaining it to me.
Yeah, I don't know where it is though.
Yeah. I know, John. I can text you the info later, John.
Okay. Thanks.
And Jim
who else would anyone else like the name of this tree company other than John?
You can copy me.
Okay.
Just so the office is aware.
Okay.
All right, balloon legislation. Susan.
Yes. Okay. As you know, I have asked for letters of support, and we are included in the presentation that I gave the other day. On October 7th, the public hearing will be held. And this is with regard to a ban on the sale and distribution of Mylar, which is owned by Monsanto. Mylar balloons and latex balloons that are lighter than air, gas-filled helium balloons in the town of East Hampton. It does not impact the village of East Hampton. So I just wanted to give you an update and let you know that we are scheduled for October 7th. The public hearing, if any one of you wants to come and join me and speak to the town board, it will be by Zoom. I have many people already who are, from organizations. I have over 20, I think 24 letters at this juncture. Organizations, environmental organizations, individuals, but mostly environmental organizations that are nationally known. And I picked up a few new people and their organizations as well. So October 7th, and it begins at 11 a.m. And anybody from the Education Committee, Ben, you've left for a moment, but Tim, Tim's wife is the chairperson for Surfrider Long Island chapter, so she did call in during the last meeting. But I invite any one of you to come and support and speak to the issue, because I know our waterways are full of balloons. And that's it. That's my update. October 7th.
Okay.
What time, Susan, on the 7th?
11 a.m. 11 a.m.
Okay.
You can call in, or you can call in or ask to be a guest on camera. But because you're on the Education Committee, I really love your support.
Yeah, I'm happy to support you with that, for sure.
Thank you.
Pretty much just almost every time you spend a little time at the beach these days, you can find a balloon floating by. So I think it's a great topic.
Thank you. And I've said this before, but I've come up with 25 alternatives, one of which I saw at Longhouse. I'm sure it wasn't because of me, but there's so many things that people can do that are reusable. I think of them as ornaments, things that you can save, and from year to year you have a memory with. So if I have 25 in 45 minutes, I'm sure the children of schools, I always say, if you're not selling them to the kids because they don't want them, then who are you selling them to? So thanks for your support, trustees, and Ben, I appreciate your coming aboard as an education member. Thank you.
Okay, so we brought up the largest clam contest previous, but we didn't speak about it.
Okay, we're moving full steam ahead, and it's getting close. Before you know it, it will be here. I hope it is live and in person this year. What we will start to do, we have all the posters at the office on the conference table. So I'm going to ask each one of you to please go by and pick up your share, as many as you can, to post in various different places. Also, we have the little boxes that we have Emma Gansett Seafood Shop, we have Stewart's, we have Montauk. So Ben, you're in Montauk. If you could take a box with all the application and the nets and so forth. And we need some help from the trustees to just finish up on that. But we've ordered everything. We seem to be in good shape. We need 3 prizes from each trustee, please. And it is again October 3rd from 12 to 3. And I look forward to the day. I think it'll be a really good one. So please go by the office, pick up some posters, please post them. And don't forget your prizes. And I'm going to email you with this too.
And Susan, can you just say when the waiting period happens again before the contest?
Oh, when you can actually go out, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. The date, I think, is from September 25th. Let me see. September 25th. Why don't I have a poster right in here? I printed this out. Okay. From the 25th through September 2nd, I think it is, that you can actually start clamming.
October 2nd.
Is that what you asked me?
Yeah. So September 25th to October 2nd, is that it?
Yes, and then the morning of, we have to go pick up the oysters that will be left, because anybody who's clammed will bring their oysters back into the shop where they pick up their application.
They're clams.
What did I say?
You said oysters.
Oh, sorry. Well, I have oysters on my mind. for maintenance. I'm sorry, clam. It's the largest clam contest, not oysters. Sorry. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
Okay.
Yep.
South Fork Sea Farmers, Oyster Reef in Acobonic Harbor.
Last meeting, we agreed to support this. But I kind of, in the presentation, they talked about 3 potential sites, and I was really focusing on one site that Bob was talking about most. I think we have, I would like to get the sense of the board's preference on which site we would recommend. I think you know, they'll have to go to the DEC for an approval here anyway. And they were mostly talking about Site A. That's the closest to the general store and where the spring school kids would take off from and kayak up there to set up the reef. But they gave alternate sites, B and C. The difference between A and either B and C is that A is in closed, waters closed to shellfishing. B and C are in waters open to shellfishing. My preference would be to use Site A because it's closest to the general store. I think it would be the most, you know, the easiest to access. Hopefully it would be, you know, off limits, so it wouldn't be disturbed. There are also DEC water quality stations very close to this site that they could use as data points in addition to the Surfrider data points that are taken down by the general store. So my only thought is that I'm not sure what the DEC's view would be on this. They might look at a reef, setting up a reef in closed waters as a potential poaching target, and they might prefer it in open waters. But I think if we sort of sent them some kind of a communication that we feel A is the best site for this, they might take that into consideration. If they didn't, I think we might want to weigh in on whether we feel B or C is a better site.
Yeah, John, B is that by the end of landing lane?
No, C is opposite landing lane. Landing lane would be right about here.
Okay.
The launching ramp.
Yeah, landing lane would be a good place to like put school buses and stuff. And Shipyard Lane is like A, right?
Shipyard is like right here.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know, you know. I mean, in a way, A and B are not that far apart. It's just a matter of which side of the closure line they're on.
Yeah,
the closure line goes right about here.
I think the closure line is right between the two sites.
That's right. Yeah.
John, I have a question about, you prefer A because it's closest to Springs General Store. That's correct? Yes?
Yes, and it's got some visibility from the end of landing lane and
okay.
Public land.
So we're not talking about this being right to the left of, if you're facing the store, that where the kayak rack is when we walk out, because the CPF funding project is there. Am I mistaken?
That's further
that's down here, Susan. The general store is down here.
Okay, that's what I thought, because I'm saying, well, Shipyard Lane is pretty far away from the store. Okay, all right,
Shipyard, yeah, Shipyard's right here. The end of Shipyard's right here.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's a good point,
So
though.
that,
Shipyard's right here.
This project's supposed to include the spring school students. So
Oh.
access to them.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Arlene, I think you have background noise.
Thank you.
I'm
So,
sorry.
what I was saying is Bill has a good point that this project's supposed to include spring students, and the access from them would probably be best at Landing Lane, so that at C. How would they access A and B?
I thought, if I recall correctly, Bob said that they would be taking kayaks from the general store.
Okay.
So they would walk to the general store, basically.
I guess they would walk to the general store and take kayaks from there. I think if they came from Landing Lane or Shipyard Lane, they'd have to ship the
Arrange
kayaks to the road end somehow.
Yeah.
Do they have a preference?
Oh, this is Arlene. Just to jump in.
Jump in.
So C at Landing Lane was the second choice. A in the closed water really was the first.
Arlene, excuse me, this is Matt. You're going to have to turn down your TVs. We got an echo.
Well, I'll check with Bob and just confirm that C is his second choice.
Okay.
But I guess if their first choice is A, we can mirror that in any comment to the DC.
Okay.
And B is third choice.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else on that?
No.
Okay. Let's move on to education. Susan? Ben?
Oh, word. Okay, education.
Tim? I think it's all three of you, right?
All three of us. Ben?
Yeah,
Are you still here? Okay.
I'm here.
On education, we have the turtle crossing signs, and this is all that I just wanted to bring up at this juncture was that the signs, we have given away 2 orders of turtle signs to the community, just asking that they let us know where they are posting them. And unfortunately, some people have said, you know, that their signs get stolen, so they come back, they get another one. We like to know where they're posted. But the last order of signs, I thought it would be a good idea that the education committee with the Captain William Rysam Scholarship Fund, that people who would like a sign could make a donation, suggested donation of $10 per sign, and they can keep the sign and reuse it for the next season, which is what we've done all along. So that was just the only change this time. I thought they are rather expensive, the signs per sign, so I thought that that would be a nice way to add to the scholarship fund. And that was it.
Read it.
Anybody?
Yeah.
If the
Tim,
sign-
Ben?
Are you going to make them
Sounds
buy
good.
another one?
Sorry?
Signs, if their sign is stolen, are you going to make them pay for another one?
Well, let me say that there are some people that have come in for 10 signs, you know, at a shot. So it's just something new since we got the new box of signs that it's for a good cause, you know. We have, one person in particular has had multiple signs. And so I did speak with that individual, and I said that this is something that, you know, we're supporting our students and for education. So we would be happy to give the next sign. But I think this is a nice way, a helpful way. It involves the community on 2 levels, protecting our turtles and helping us with our kids for education.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lazy Point, Nappy. We have a request from Pamela Keene, leaseholder of 177 Shore Road, Lot 32S and part of 33S, for approval to sublease her home to Sarah Tallett, resident of the town of East Hampton. Chris isn't here tonight. I don't know This one's been vetted.
I have all the documents here that I've printed out. And we have a New York State license. Arlene, if you're listening, can you hear? We have a complete copy of the lease, an affidavit of domicile completed by Sarah Tallett and notarized, a copy of Sarah Tallett's driver's license, which I have right there.
Address?
I'm sorry?
I have a physical address, not a P.O. box.
85 South Elroy Drive, Montauk, New York. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, that was 200 East Elroy. We have everything in place, and she is a local person. She works here full time. She's been here for quite some time. I have spoken with Pam Keene about her in advance, so I know that she is. She sounds like the perfect kind of candidate to have in Lazy Point because she is committed to the community. We seem to have everything in order, so I don't know if you want to wait, or I could make a motion this evening to accept.
If you're comfortable making a motion.
I will make a motion that we have the documents here to permit Pamela Keene to lease her property to Sarah.
Is there a second?
A second.
Second.
Thank you.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No one opposed. Okay.
So John, you seconded it? Yes, thank you.
We're good. Pump out boat. An update on the 2021 season. I don't, who's supposed to give that? We have it?
Who's pump out committee?
We have a copy of it? Can we table that one till next meeting? Do I have a motion?
Motion to table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Payment of the bills. We have East Hampton Marina, $315.79 for gas and oil. Optimum, $152.02. Montauk Marine Basin, $1,385.90 for gas and supplies. East Hampton Star, $180.50. Montauk Printing, $130 for largest clam contest posters. Staples, $140.09. Van Dyke and Hand, that's our accountant, $880. Do I have a motion to pay the bills?
Motion to pay bills.
Second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And we have financials for the month ended August 2021. Oh, not ready to be reviewed. I'm sorry. Okay, so report of the clerk. I have one thing. We're all aware of the incident that took place with the receivers for the Oyster fish study. We have possession of the coordinates for those receivers, and I want to know if we want to post those on our website. I'm not sure that trawlers visit our website, but we can put it up there, and it's another source for them to find it.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, Francis, that we put it up on our website and share the information with our community. There's other users out there. There are people that recreationally fish and free dive in the area. So I think it's just a good practice, good safety practice. So I would support it.
I as well.
Anybody opposed? No? Okay, so we'll get that up tomorrow.
Are you going to send that to Michael then, Francis?
Yeah.
Or do you want to?
We'll get them to you, and they can go up to Michael.
Okay.
All right.
Mhm.
Do you have anything else before we say goodnight?
Have a good evening.
Okay.
Motion to close?
What? I'm sorry, Rick?
Motion to close?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.